First of all, the Chodesh, as you all know, is a woman's Yom Tov. It's a Yom Tov for Fruin. The women don't do work. They don't, whatever it is, if they're able to, they don't wash, they don't do work. Because it's a Yom Tov. And of course, it's more than just a coincidental thing. The women were not mishtatif in the Egel. So because of not mishtatif in the Egel, you had to find a day that nobody else celebrates, and they gave him the Chodesh. But you must understand that the Rosh Chodesh has to do with a likui, right? The disappearance of the moon has to do with a chesaron. A likui. You know what likui means? A blemish, a damage. The Eibishter created a world that was perfectly balanced, and then he unbalanced it. And the truth of the matter is, if the balance had been maintained, there couldn't be a world. The only way there's a world is there's a lack of balance. But one of the aspects of that balance was that the sun and the moon would be the same size. And this has many, many manifestations. I mean, you learn in Chassidus how they trace back all the inexactness in the world to the imbalance that the Eibishter created in his world. It begins with Tzimtzum Rishon, and it continues with Shviras HaKelim Avela Mateyu. And then in the Ma'aseh Bereishis, you have a series of aspects that are symptoms of this inexactitude. The first is Machlokes Monday. Monday is day of separation. And even though separation is necessary, because if you have no separation, you have no world, you have no relationships, but it's considered even for not good. The second is that on Tuesday, when the Eibishter created the tree, the plants, the Zroim and the Elones, the seeds and the grasses and the trees, he said, Ve'etz Pri. Eitz Pri means that tam eitzek, a tam period, that every tree, the bark of the tree should taste like the fruit. And instead of being Eitz Pri, it became Eitz Oise Pri. Instead of the tree tasting like the fruit, the tree has no taste, it just produces fruit. This is another likui, another chesaron of the Eibishter's world, which is a symptom of the first likuyim. And then, of course, on Wednesday, the next day, the Eibishter created the sun and the moon and the stars, and then they were both the same, Shnei Ameres HaGedelim, and then right away it was Amoy HaGodl and Amoy HaKotan, the larger sun and the smaller moon. And then, of course, this has to do with all the other likuyim, how you have, that the Rashi brings even in Chumash, that the fact that you have an eclipses are considered a symptom of not good, and all these other Oiseis HaShamayim, the symptoms that you see in the heavens that reflect that the Eibishter's world, as it relates to the earth, is not perfect. They all have spiritual significance, and they all can be traced back to earlier chesrenis. And the culmination of all of these was Chet Eitzadas. Chet Eitzadas was a choice, right? Man was given free choice. And when I say man, man means Adam and Chava means man. And they made a choice which was not according to the Eibishter's Ratzon, which added much more complexity to the Eibishter's world, which requires Birudim and Tshuva and Esyenis. Biz Mashiach had Kumen, yeah? We blame it on the woman. Ha'isha shenas nali, shelasate imadi, he nos nali v'achela. Zoktrashi kan kofel atayda. What does a man do when he gets in trouble? He blames his wife. And the Eibishter doesn't forgive Adam Rishon for blaming his wife, but she was taka guilty because she listened to the Nachash, and she brought the payday to Adam Rishon. Why did she listen to the Nachash? So it says in Chazal, Rashi brings to the Chumash, Nosham daitem kales. They're easier to fadrein. They're more vulnerable because they're more emotional, or whatever the explanations are, doesn't matter. So this is why women are blamed. Everything is women's fault, yeah? Matzah Shabbos, by some people there's a custom that women don't look at the nail. You know that, right? In different communities, women do look at the candle. In some communities, women don't look at the candle. And in those communities where women don't look at the candle, it's because the need for a candle, Matzah Shabbos, has to do with Chet Eitzadas. Why do you need a candle? Because it's dark at night. Why is it dark at night? Because when the Eibishter created the world, it was light by day and by night. It was a different kind of light. You understand? There's the light of the sun, there's the light of the moon. And then there was a light which was Mishtamish, B'Sheshes, Mebereishes, that never went away. Didn't have a source. It was just light. And it was didn't have a physical source. The source was the Eibishter. And the Chet Eitzadas removed that light. So that's why, so for the first 36 hours of their life, Adam and Chava's life, that means Friday and Friday night and Shabbos, they had that light. So Friday night it was light the whole night, but Matzah Shabbos that light went away. So Adam and Chava took a flint and he struck it and he made fire. So women don't say Be'eri Meri Ha'esh because we blame them for it. Verstehst? I'm a chaya. Yeah, but this all turns on its head when it comes to the Chet Egel. You understand? Because the Chet Egel is all the way around. The women refused, and the men. Now you can't blame it on your wife. Your wife said, "Keep your jewelry. I'm not giving you my jewelry for an aveda." So they were given a Chedesh as a Yom Tov. Why were they given a Chedesh as a Yom Tov? Because Resh Chedesh has to do with the disappearance of the moon and the reappearance of the moon. And the disappearance of the moon and the reappearance of the moon is part of this story. From a mystical perspective, from a perspective of Kabbalah, it's a part of the story. All of these things, the Machlekes, the Tzimtzum Arish, the Shviras HaKelim of Teyu, and the Machlekes B'Yom HaSheni, and the Tam Eitze Einik Tam Pirya B'Yom HaShlishi, and then the large and the Moel HaGod, the Moel HaKot, and the B'Yom HaRevi, and all the Likuyim which are described, and the fact that on Friday there was a Chet Eitz Hadas, when the woman did not participate in Chet Egel, they were defying, they were reversing all of those things. So the Eibishter gave them the Yom Tov of Reish Chedesh, which has to do with the birth of the moon. That even though the idea that there's a darkness is not a good thing, but the darkness, which is not a good thing, allows for there to be newness. If you don't have darkness, if the first thing doesn't end, the second thing that continues is not new. It's a continuation. So if you think about it, the choice, the idea that women will give it a Yom Tov Reish Chedesh is really a statement to the effect that men love to blame women for everything that goes wrong. So they just gave him a Yom Tov. Excuse me, we didn't make the mistake, you made the mistake. Faket, we refused to participate in the Chet Egel. That's the Yom Tov of Reish Chedesh. Anyway, this is it's true. What I'm telling you is true. The Reish Chedesh is not just a Yom Tov for women because we wanted to give them a Yom Tov that nobody keeps, because it's consistent with the story. Right? Chet Egel was the continuation of all of these events that happened at the beginning of creation. And the women refused to participate. Until then, you blamed everything on the women. And now the women are saying, if not for you, we would be in Eretz right away in the Beis HaMikdash, Nibchayim Nitzchim, and Allah Zach. It's all the men's fault. And they stick around, the ladies. What can I tell you? So we're learning Tanya. And the last handful of classes, I don't know how many, 2 or 3, I just looked on my phone. We were lecturing. We're not learning any text. And what we've been doing is the Midas. We're learning Perek Gimel, chapter 3 in Tanya. In Perek Gimel and Tanya, the Alter Rebbe talks about the Esek Koyches HaNefesh, the faculties of the soul. And he correlates the Esek Koyches HaNefesh, the 10 faculties of the soul, with the Esek Sfiras Al-Yenis, Shenishtal Shalomem, from the 10 supernal Sfiras, which are the source of the Esek Koyches HaNefesh. What's the problem? The problem is that the Alter Rebbe only explains Chochmah and Bina and Das. He doesn't really explain the 6 midas. He really doesn't. He mentions them b'Havloah after he talks about Chochmah and Bina, so he talks about Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, but he doesn't give the attention that you would think he should. To Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Heg, Yised, and Malchus, in this Perek, which is the dedicated Esek Koyches HaNefesh. So I explained to you, I told you, I don't know if it's true, but I think that in the Igeres HaKedesh, in the back of the Tanya, there's an Igeres HaKedesh Tesvav, the 15th letter in the Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe does explain all the 6 midas, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, and he explains them twice. First he explains them Bechlal in the Nefesh, and then at the end of the Perek he explains them in the Nefesh Alakis, and that Perek also finishes, the very end of Tesvav, Igeres HaKedesh, Alter Rebbe talks about Chochmah, Bina, and Das. So what I have been doing is going over the midas with you. And we did, in the last several classes, I don't know exactly how many we had, we did Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So far, that's what we did. We did Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So what I want to do this week I want to talk about Midas HaMalchus. Okay, I want to talk about, in other words, today's topic is Midas HaMalchus. Today's class is on Midas HaMalchus. But I want to repeat at least Beklalos, at least basically, the conversation that we had in the preceding weeks. Okay? There aren't really 6 emotions. There are really only 3 emotions. And the reason there are only 3 emotions is because if you want to start specifying emotions, you can have hundreds of different emotions. If you want to generalize about emotions, so how basic can it become? So a pitera, it's a right and a left and a center. That's it. That's all there is. A right and a left and a center. Every emotion which is leaning towards the right is chesed. Every emotion which is leaning towards the left is gvura. And in kedusha there's a center. In klipa there is an arbitrary center, a center bechitzonius. But in Kedusha there's a real center, and the center is Tiferes, and the center is Yossi. And again, if you have been with us on this journey, we discussed these ideas and the language that we employ to explain Tiferes, and then later to explain Yossi, was like a corner. Right? What's a corner? A corner is two walls. This is a northern wall, and this is a western wall, that are at right angles to one another. So the corner is a thing. The wall is a thing. A wall is a thing. Corners don't exist. Corners exist in people's imaginations. The first person to put two walls together at a right angle to create a mokem, shamar, a guarded place, was using two physical things to create a third entity, which although exists in physically, isn't physical. Right? How much space does a corner take up? The edge of the corners don't take up any space, because corners are not walls, corners are ideas. But when you have a seichel, you can superimpose on the physical northern wall, the physical southern wall, a relationship which produces a third entity. So you're using, in the Hebrew technical languages, you're using mitzias to bring down something which is higher than mitzias. One wall is a mitzias, the other wall is a mitzias. The relationship between them is a non-mitzias, but you're using mitzias to reveal something which is higher than mitzias. And the same is true. Chesed is a mitzias. All the midas which are leading towards the right side is a mitzias. All the midas which are leading to the left side is a mitzias. The creating of a convergence. We have a mitzias of chesed, a mitzias of gvura that's combined to reveal a emes of teferes. This is the superimposition of built-in mitzias on mitzias, and that's midas at teferes, that's midas hayasei. No, so there's only three midas. How come we talk about six? If there's only three, a right and a left and a center, how come we have six? And the answer is because they're two very, very different things. The three midas chagas are the emotional reaction to Chabad. When you know information, you get excited. Sometimes the information that you know excites you in a way of chesed and ahava. You want to be close to it. Sometimes the information that you have creates an emotion of yira. You either want to be far from it, or you're afraid of becoming distant from it. And then there's the center. The center is that even though there's a svara, there's a leaning towards running towards it, and there's leaning towards running away from it, or being careful not to be distanced from it, the third emotion, teferes, is the perfect emotion, where you're not reacting to the information, but you're actually feeling b'asher u'sham what the information is. So chagas, the way I like to describe it, chesed, gevurah, teferes, is the body of the seichel. If your mind, which has knowledge, would be called a neshama, your emotional reactions to that neshama would be its goof. So chagas is the chitenius of Chabad. Nehi is pufakeret. Nehi are emotions that are the neshama of asiyah. In the real world, you have to do things. And when you learn chassidus, you learn that doing things means three things: ma'aseh, to do an act; dibur, to say words; and machshava, to think thoughts. Ma'aseh, dibur, machshava, 3 steps. Yeah? Netach, hoid, and yesod are the emotions that get things done. That when you encounter obstacles, you encounter hardships, Netzach is going to overcome, he's going to fight with any enemy to get it done. Hoid is going to be stubborn so that no enemy can derail it. And yesod is iskashtas, and you get so emotionally connected to what you need to do that you don't see any enemies, you just see the purpose. So chagas and nehi are not 6 emotions, they're 2 sets of 3. Chagas are higher emotions. This has to do with connections to ideas and to truth. Nehi are lower emotions. They're much more basic emotions. They're emotions that motivate machshava, dibur, ma'aseh, behavioral, act, speech, and thought. This is a summary. Now, what was the chiddush in this whole shmuas? What was the last class I gave you on this before Pesach? It was a while ago. It probably was a month ago. The chiddush is that Chabad is higher than Chagas. Chagas is higher than Nehi. That is in terms of its sophistication. In terms of its reichkeit, its beauty, its richness, Chabad is much deeper than Chagas. Chagas is much deeper than Nehi. But there's another point of view. And the other point of view is that there are some things which are more atzmiyistic. Atzmiyistic means they're closer to the very essence of your person. And here it's faket. Nehi is closer to the Yetzem than Chagas, and Chagas is closer to the Yetzim than Chabad. In other words, Chabad is nicer than Chagas on the outside. Chagas is nicer than Nehi on the outside. But the power of Nehi, v'gam netzach Yisrael le'yinochem v'le'yishokah ki le'yu adam hu le'yinochem, like we discussed. Right? Midas ha-netzach, the Alter Rebbe brings it, the Frierdiker brings it in his Maimah Bossi Legani, goes to the Yetzem ha-nefesh. Because simple reaches the essence. So Nehi, Taka is the simplest emotions. It's much simpler emotions than Chagas. But because they're simple, they're much closer to the power of the infinity of what the Neshama is than is Chagas. And certainly much closer to the power and the infinity of this, the Neshama, than is Chabad. So it's as they say in English, it's a half a dozen of one, 6 of one or half a dozen of the other. Chabad, in terms of its Reichkeit, is higher than Chagas, which is in turn higher than Nehi. But in terms of its Atzmiistic, it's the other way around. And the way I explained it to you, I gave you the Dugma Poshet from how they explain it in biology. That they have the old part of the brain, the new part of the brain. You have to understand, the old part of the brain, the new part of the brain were created exactly at the same time. I don't know if you saw last night's this week's video. In Shul, they show it every week. So it was a Yid, a modern Orthodox rabbi, became head of a school. And he came to see the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe about Teiro Mada, religion and science. And the Rebbe told him the sun circles the earth doesn't circle the sun. And that the creation happened in 6 literal days, not in epochs. The Rambam zogt nicht das, the Rebbe told him. The Rambam does not say that name. The Rambam zogt nicht das. 6 days means 6 actual days. So evolution doesn't happen over time. It happens at the in a minute, yeah? The new part of the brain is the place of analysis and reason and abstract thinking. They call it the prefrontal lobe. You should know they know very little about the brain. They understand the universe better than they understand the human brain. Everybody appreciates how the human brain is so amazing. But they're beginning to map it, you know. Every decade or so they have more details about the brain. You know, they have these big pieces and little pieces. I mean, the whole brain is a small little thing. But they're trying to find which parts of the brain have to do with certain things. And then they find all kinds of status that certain aspects of a person's function can come from very disparate parts of the brain. It's the brain is the Meibishter. In the brain you have the neshama. But there's a part of the brain which only human beings have. Lahavd. It's the very front, prefrontal lobe they call it. That's why our heads are so big. Right? In Teva, why is it that when a woman has a baby it's so painful? And animals have babies and they don't know the idea of pain. Because the head is very, very large. The body. Why is the head so large? Because it holds a very large brain. The largest brain towards body size is by far a human being. Because the brain of a person is good, not difficult to say. The MS is that when a baby is born, there's a the top of the head is soft. The reason is because the brain, the first 6 months, the baby is still developing, like as if it's in Europe. The brain is physically developing, and so the skull has to expand to be able to tolerate the additional brain mass. So why doesn't the woman hold the baby more months, and the baby should be born? The Torah says because the baby portion would not be able to physically be born. It's a very, very large brain, and a part of that very large brain is what we call Chabad. Animals don't have Chabad, even great apes, Lahavdul, Elef, Alfi, Abdullas. Yeah, and then there's something called the old part of the brain. It's where instinct is. Instinct, where you have instinct to respond. They call it in psychology, fight or flee, stand or run away. When there's an enemy, yeah, should you hide or should you confront or should you run? You have no time to make a decision. That comes from your etzem. Your etzem is called nihi, ne'etzached yisei. It's the lowest level of the nefesh in terms of sophistication, but it's closest to the etzem. So it's kechois ma'masapech. There's 2 sides. On the one hand, of course, Chabad is so much deeper than Chagas, and Chagas is even deeper than Nehi. But on the other hand, Nehi is much more visceral. It's much more atzmiistic than Chagas, which is in turn more deep than Chabad. Okay, this is a Chazorah. Ad kan techen advarim. This is a review of what we learned in the last 4 classes. I don't know how many, 3, 4 classes before Yom Tov. Let's talk about Malchus. Now, Malchus is interesting. The reason Malchus is interesting is because Malchus is an emotion. Malchus is an emotion. But not all Maimori Chasidis speak of Malchus as an emotion. Many Maimori Chasidis farkuken overlook the emotion of Midas HaMalchus. Malchus is the 7th emotion. Now we already know that emotion goes in groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, chagas, 1, 2, 3, nihi. Yeah? If there's another set of emotions, it should be again 1, 2, 3. And if there's not another set of emotions, so then what's this one? What's this one? What's Midas HaMalchus? How does it fit? So again, I'm telling you that Malchus is a midah, it's an emotion, but there are many Maimonic Chassidus that do not discuss the emotion of Midas HaMalchus. Now, I am going to start with the emotion of Malchus. I'm going to start from the higher level, and then I'm going to go to the lower level, okay? I'm going to explain to you first the emotion of Midas HaMalchus, and then I'm going to explain to you when a lot of my Morim, they ignore the fact that Midas HaMalchus is an emotion. And you'll also understand how it could be 1 and how it could be the 7th. The rule of emotions is, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Heid, and Yesed, the rule of emotions is, and we talked about this before Yom Tif, is quote, it's the Lashon Hazeyar, Chesed, Ozil, Imkulu, Yoimin. Every feeling has love. Every emotion has love. Even anger has love. Even hate has love. I told you this when I was a yeshiva bacher. I had an elder bacher who told me a handful of werter, which I mamish lived by. He wasn't even so close to me, but he got to me. And one of the things he told me once, I remember him, and I'm Makateva, I taught his children, and I lived a few vet, a bacher, told me a few things. He wasn't close to me, because I was very difficult to be close to, because I took up the whole room, like the Ma'aseh in Samach Tzedek. But he found his way to my heart. He told me that, mamish, a handful of things that I constantly quote, because he gave me wisdom. And one of them was, he asked me, what's the opposite of love? So I said hate. He said, nope. Nope. And he wouldn't help me, so I was stuck. The one who knows everything ran out of information. After he let me admit that I don't know anything, he said the opposite of love is indifference. The opposite of love is no feeling. Because Zayar says every emotion has chesed. What does that mean? Chesed doesn't mean I love you. Chesed means I'm close to you. Close enough to you to feel you. Right? When you see a member of your family rejoicing or having a painful experience, you emotionally react because you feel them. If you're a bigger human being, a deeper person, you see a fellow Jew suffering or experiencing a joy, you're a big enough person, you emotionally react to them because they're also close to you, because since you're bigger, you reach further and you can feel them as well. If you're an even bigger person, anytime you see any human being, even Nishkayid, experience a joy, experience a tzar, you're a big enough person, you can feel with them. If you're an even bigger person, you can feel an animal, you can feel the pleasure of an animal, you can feel the happiness of an animal, you can feel the sadness of an animal, the pain of an animal, right? And the bigger the person are, the more your reaches. But the klal in the regesh is its kiruv. And that's what Zohar means. Every emotion has chesed. Because chesed means love, technically. But chesed philosophically means connection. You feel someone else because you have a connection with them. That connection is called chesed. So every regesh has connection. There's one exception. And that Midas HaMalchus. Midas HaMalchus is the diametrical opposite of all the 6 Midas that came before it. Why? Because the emotion of Midas HaMalchus is feeling distant. That's what it means. The Hebrew word for Midas HaMalchus is a roimemus. The translation of roimemus in English is exaltedness. The translation of exaltedness is reimemus. The translation of reimemus is exaltedness. The translation of exaltedness is reimemus. You get the point. The English is no better than the Hebrew. To use a word which is a little closer to our language, it's a feeling of aloofness. Malchus it translates in English as exaltedness. Aloofness. A person feels emotionally aloof. The word aloof is not used in a positive way. Oh, he's aloof. Oh, how wonderful. A person who's aloof of the pshat, the way we use that word. He doesn't care about you. That's how we use the word aloof. But maybe I'm misusing the word, but aloof means a feeling of being above. So if a person is aloof and he doesn't care about you, that's not a midah, that's a midah at all. It's an I don't care, yeah? But the way Chassidus explains Reimamus is as there is an emotion of feeling higher than others. In other words, as opposed to Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Chayit, and Yisei, where we say Chesed, Ozil, and Kula Yoimin, every emotion is my connection, my closeness to you. There is another idea where you feel far from another person. It's called the Rebbe. It's exactly the opposite of the first 6 meters. But there's a catch. What's the catch? That the Reimamus, Malchus, means I feel above you. In other words, in Malchus, there's 2 aspects. There's the feeling of being higher, and there's the feeling of being higher than an entity, something other. Yeah. To use a physical example, the moon is in orbit around the earth. It's rotating around the earth. Yeah, what keeps the moon around the earth? It's a combination of 2 factors. The moon is traveling through space in a straight line very fast. I don't know the speed, but there's people who can tell you how fast it's traveling. And the earth is pulling on the moon because it has a gravitational tug, but also with a certain amount of energy. And the amount of energy which the earth is pulling on the moon, and the amount of energy of the moon revolving around the earth reach a state of equilibrium of being exactly the same. So the earth pulls on the moon, so the moon can't go straight. But the moon is running away, so it doesn't crash in. And when they reach that state of exact, the 2 forces balance out, you have what's called an orbit. It spins around. The moon is really running straight. But the earth doesn't let it run straight. The earth keeps going in a circle. If the moon would slow down a little bit, it would crash into the earth. If the moon would speed up a little bit, it would fly away. But when the speed of the rotating moon is exactly in balance with the tug of gravity, you have an orbit. That's how it's explained in Gashmis. It's a very simple thing, yeah? A physical thing, yeah? So when the moon is in orbit around the earth, what's the pshat? He's higher than the earth. Sure, he's higher than the earth. But he's higher than the earth. Because if the moon was higher than the earth, it would fly away. Why doesn't it fly away? Because it's above the earth. You understand? So there's 2 things at play. The first thing is that the moon is above the earth, on the side that you can see it, obviously. On the other hand, it's above the earth. It's above the earth in relationship with the earth. And the same is true in the Nimsha. Malchus, Reimamus, is an emotion. It's an emotion of feeling higher than another. But the emotion of feeling higher than another is in relationship with the other. This is what they call in Chassidus, Teva HaMerumam Liyas Nimshach Al HaShafal. They explain this B'negei to Midas HaRachmim as well. But B'Klolos, B'Pashtus, it goes with Teva HaMerumam Liyas Nimshach Al HaShafal means one who was merumam, which in English means exalted. And I like to use the word aloof because you know what the word means. Plain English, you know what the word means. But the tava, the nature of one who was aloof, is that he's drawn to one who is low. When you are a greater human being than the people around you, you're more intelligent, you're more sensitive, you're more clear. Yeah? But you're a human being. You don't not care about the people around you. You have a sense of duty and responsibility to them. But that emotion is not because you feel them. For cats, you're so far removed from them, you have nothing in common with them. Chesed means you and I are more or less the same. So I feel you because what you're experiencing is similar to what I'm experiencing. Right now, there's money in my pocket. There's not money in your pocket. So I'll give you money. It's based on closeness. And the same is true of Gevura and Teferes and Netzach and Yisei. Malchus means you and I have nothing in common. But I'm above you. It's an emotion of being higher than those that are below. And the way Reimamus works is the greater you are, the more remote is your reach. A small king, can only feel a handful of people to a certain degree. A great king can feel many, many, many more people to a far greater extent. And here it's punfachet, it's inverse. The higher and the further you are away from the people, the more you're involved with those people, and the more people you can be involved with. If you're a small king, you're only a little like the moon. If you're a big king, you're like the sun. You're much further from the earth. But your reach is far greater. But the key to understanding Midas HaMalchus is to understand that it's an emotion. It's a feeling of being higher than others. And that feeling of being higher than others means in this aloofness, in this exaltedness, I'm responsible for them. So what motivates a king to look after his citizens? It's not love. It's not fear. It's not compassion. It's kingship. I'm the king, and I carry the burden of the entire people on my back because I'm the king. Like the Rabbi brings the Lashon, Melech is Liban shall call Yisrael. He's the heart of the whole nation. How could one human being be a heart of so many? Because he's higher than all of the people. That's the emotion of Malchus. You see, that's the feeling of being a king. The feeling of being a king is Midas HaMalchus. So you have 6 Midas that all go into one category, B'Kolos, and that is Mitzat HaMurgish, closeness. You feel somebody because you relate to them. Chesed is that way, Gvur is that way, Tiferes is that way, Netzach is that way, Hoyd is that way, and Yosei is that way. Malchus, on the other hand, you also feel connected to another, but pum faket, you don't feel connected because of what you have in common, you feel connected because of how far you are away. And if you're the biggest king in the world, you can have Rahman, just on the Yid, not as a member of your nation. Because the greater the Hisreimamus, the more the exaltedness, the more the emotional distance, the farther the emotional reach. So a king sees his subjects, I don't know what the right word is, as his children, as his responsibility, to the degree of Mesiras Nefesh Agami. His Metzias, his responsibility that he has for others based on his exaltedness, his reimamus, his aboveness. That's the emotion of Midas HaMalchus. You got it? So far so good, yeah? Now here begins the problems. I just described to you a psychological thing, yeah? The problem is, how do you separate Midas HaReimamus from good old Gaiva? Everybody knows what Gaiva is. Gaiva is go, I'm bigger than you. Practically. Now I can be a teeny tiny little guy, but if I stand on your head, or I need to stand on your head, or I tell myself I'm standing on your head, it's a midaro Gaiva, right? There's the famous story. I never saw it in the Makir, but I've heard the story many times. That the Razor was shorter than the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe Rashab's older brother was shorter than him. And he was very self-conscious about it. So when they would walk, he would always have the Rebbe Rashab walk on a hill. And he'd be above, and the Rebbe would be below. And the Rebbe Marash once observed how the older brother makes his brother walk in a ditcher so that he should be taller than him. So he called him. So they came in, and the Rebbe Marash told his older son to get up on a chair. And he got up on the chair. And the Rebbe Marash said, Otazeh. This is how you become taller than him. Not by lowering him, by raising yourself. Right? So a Baal Gaiva really is not in the business of raising himself. A Baal Gaiva is in the business of lowering everybody around him. A person who raises himself is not a Baal Gaiva, he's a human being. We were created to raise ourselves. A human being who measures himself by other people, instead of measuring himself by his own need to grow and diminishes them, so he should be a muhus and a metzias, this is about Gaiva. So what is the difference between Gaiva and the Midas HaReimamus that I just described? So obviously the passionate the difference is, a Baal Gaiva doesn't care about anybody but himself. Right? A Baal Gaiva doesn't care about anybody but himself. The whole metzias, the whole metzias of a Baal Gaiva is to put others down so he should be a bigger metzias. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. That's what a Baal Gaiva is, yeah. But there's something much deeper. And this much deeper is the reason Malchus is oftentimes or sometimes not included in the Midas. And the head is Ein Melech B'lei Yam. Everybody has a neshama. The neshama is created by the Eibishter. And the neshama is perfect, and the neshama is whole, and the neshama is complete. So if your neshama is perfect and whole and complete, your neshama has every part of the neshama, including Midas HaMalchus. But there's an unusual characteristic of Midas HaMalchus, and the technical language is that the emotion of Malchus is in a helem she'enei b'mtzias. Before you feel the emotion of Melucha, it's hidden in you. Before you experience the Midah of Chesed, it's hidden in you. But there's a very big difference. Midas HaChesed is hidden in the Nefesh in a way that's called the helem she'yeshnei b'mtzias. It's hidden, but very easily revealed. Al derech moshel, a coal that's hot, fiery coal, but has no flame. You give a little blow and the flame comes up. And the nimshal is, if you have Midas HaChesed, Midas HaAhava, the emotion of love and sense of closeness hidden, to reveal it is very easy, Megit HaBlos. But Melucha, this feeling of Reimamus that we just described, is a helem she'enei b'metzias. Al derech moshel, fire in a chalamish, in a flintstone. That you can't get fire out of a flintstone by blowing on it. You want to get fire out of a flintstone, you have to give a zetz, and there's a whole avodah to harness that fire, and to develop that fire, and to keep that fire, and to grow that fire. But by itself, it doesn't have a Matthias. And the Nimshal is, every human being has the Midah of Malchus. But almost none of us feel it. In other words, we don't have true Adividas Aremus. If you or I feel higher than other people, it's Gaiven, not Aremus. Why? Because you cannot arouse it yourself. You can make yourself feel love towards another person. The only thing you need is that the person should exist. That's it. You can make yourself feel emotionally precise, judging of another. You cannot make yourself feel higher than other human beings. Only they can. Ein melech b'lei in a sense. To reveal this emotion, where you're connected to others not based on your sense of closeness, but you're connected to others based on your distance. This is not an emotion that a person can bring out of himself. And when a person brings that out of himself, it's good old gaiva. This emotion, the people have to create it. That's the concept of a melech, which you always talk about in Rosh Hashanah season. Every year it comes up, sometimes more bariches, sometimes less bariches, but you always talk about it. We make the Eibishter a melech. Why can he make himself a melech? The Rabbi used to say, Tam Dechuni Aleichem, the Gemara says, the Eibishter Betzach, he's begging Jewish people, make me your king. Because the whole Chiddush of Midas HaMalchus is that it has to be called out by the So I just told you two things. Number one, Malchus is a real emotion. It's a real feeling. But it's very different than the feelings that are before. Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, Heden, Yisei. Because the feelings that we discussed earlier are about Kiruf. I feel you because of what I have in common with you. Midas HaMalchus, I feel you because of what I don't have in common with you. I'm higher than you. I'm removed from you. And that's the basis, that's the source of my hashpah. And when a melech is mashpi on an am, it's not chesed, it's not rachamim, it's melucha. He senses the people have the responsibility for them, and on that basis he gives instructions, he creates law, and he builds infrastructure, and he helps the people. It's not love, it's not fear, it's not compassion, it's malchus. But because of this rule of ein melech v'lo yam, the vast majority, the vast majority of human beings have never felt that emotion. And when we feel that emotion, it's not real reimamus, it's a belashon saginot, it's a borrowed, it's not real sense of this emotional exaltedness. Therefore, because of what I just said, there are occasions, in Chassidus, a lot of occasions, maybe a majority of occasions, where they don't speak of Malchus as an emotion at all. We happen to be in times of Sfiras Eimer. In times of Sfiras Eimer, Malchus is a midah. There's Chesed Sheba Malchus, and Gvura Sheba Malchus, and Teferes Sheba Malchus, and Netzach Sheba Malchus, and Hoyd Sheba Malchus, and Yisei Sheba Malchus, and there's even Malchus Sheba Malchus. Yeah? But in many Maimonic Chassidus, they don't talk about Malchus as an emotion. They talk about Malchus, like it says in the Pasach Eliyahu, which we say on Friday, Malchus Peh. Malchus is the Eibishter's mouth. The Eibishter's mouth is you to speak and create the world. In other words, Malchus is the level of the person, and Koyachol Lamayla Lahavdol, that relates to things that are outside and removed and separate from self. Just like when you do an action, you're using the world around you to make a change. Even when you're speaking words, even though the words are coming from inside of your lungs, inside of your heart, and inside of your mind, inside of your heart, they're radiating out of you into the world. So the idea of Malchus is an involvement with what's outside. But these are two very different ideas. The first idea is a very deep emotion. It's the emotion of feeling above others. But feeling above others in the kind of a way that you feel fully responsible for them. And on the other extreme, there is the simple doing actions in relation with the world around ourselves. What's the connection between the two? It's very simple. Because it's the same principle. The emotion of Malchus is, I'm higher and I'm involved in lower. And the action of Malchus is, whatever I am. But Malchus means I'm involved with something which is outside of me, less than me. Ideally, perfectly, in the perfect world, you would feel an emotion of reimamus in relationship with the world. And that's why you would do Torah mitzvahs in this world, to make a din leis barach b'tachtein. But the average human being doesn't feel the emotion of Malchus. He just feels what's called in the culture levushim. Thought, speech, and action. I'll be honest, machshava, dibur, u'mais, thought, speech, and action is the next pedic. It's pedic dalet. And it's the chitiniyas Malchus. Therefore, in some places, they talk about Malchus as an emotion, as a midah. In other places, they talk about Malchus as being involved in the next world, because Malchus is able to engage in things much lower than itself, because it can separate, you see? You see, that's the other type of Ein Melech B'Layam. Imagine you're a Chocham like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. and he wasted time with such great scientists like you and me and him and her and all the rest of us. There could be no greater disparity between a Gadol Yisrael and his daughter like the Rebbe experienced. So why was he so involved with us? Because that's what Malchus allows for. Malchus allows for you to be connected to things that normally have no connection whatsoever with. And on the lower level, that connection shows itself in mice. This is why in the Chassidish culture, the whole, what do you say about Chassidish Verbringen? L'chaim is al geben dem Rebbe manachas ruach. The first thing you say is l'chaim, the Rebbe soll sagen gesund nicht stark. And the second thing is l'chaim, we should give the Rebbe manachas ruach. Because the idea that Anoshim Ke'arkeinu, simple people like you and me and us, could do something which is meaningful to the Rebbe is to us the most meaningful thing in the world. So you scratch your head and say the Rebbe cares, and says sure he cares, but he's the Rebbe, and he's Merumim, and he's a Melech, and that's the teretz. When you're a Merumim, you're Nimshach al Shafal. The greater the Rebbe must Ein Melech B'layam. On the one hand, Ein Melech B'layam is the people make him a king. On the other hand, Ein Melech B'layam means no human being would engage with creatures so far away from themselves based on Midas HaChesed or Midas HaGvura or Midas HaNetzach or Midas HaOid. But Malchus, the feeling of being removed, reaches the lowest and the furthest. And that's why, like I said before, in our generation, there is this idea that you have to give the Rebbe Nachas Ruach, Akedas Ruach, and you do it through Lei HaMedrash Iker Ela HaMaise, right? You want to give the Rebbe Nachas? Do indeed, to a Maitha. I got a letter online from a younger man whom I don't know. Most of the people I teach, I don't know. And unfortunately, most of the people I know, I'm not very successful at teaching. It's really weird. But at least that's my Helen Vehester. I'm not going to say my Nisoin, it's my Chesed. So there's a guy listening to me online, and he says that I describe this often. The eyes of the Rebbe, the eyes. I'm a bocher of the Mems. I never had yechidus in the sense of actually being by the Rebbe and having a relationship of any kind of pnimius. Everything by me was part of 1,000 people, 10,000 people. Yeah? But the Rebbe looked into your eyes, and that was a whole language. The Rebbe's eyes were a whole language, and if you were half a mensch, you looked back as much as you could look back. And this was a conversation that went on in my Bachrim years, when I was getting married, and after I was married. Our relationship was with the eyes. And I'm not unique. Everybody from my generation knows those eyes. The eyes talk to you. And they were happy, and they were sad, and they were demanding, and they were sometimes not available. Those eyes, you couldn't lie to those eyes, and those eyes never lied to you. And nobody but you knew. It was so pratiistic. It was so, the Rebbe had this capacity, sitting at a Fabringen, every person he looks at is a whole other conversation, and he moves to the next, it's a new conversation. How do you move so quick from conversation to conversation? And only you and him. This is why the Rebbe is the Rebbe, yeah? We're fortunate to have him as a Rebbe and to be his Chassidim, yeah? So as I was describing the eyes, so he writes me an email, he's all upset, he never looked into the Rebbe's eyes, he's a lost case, started. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, yeah. So I had to answer him. What am I going to tell him? Yeah, you talk as Rachmanis and you forget about it. Who's going to benefit from that? So I told him what I believe to be true. I say, but Klal, in our generation, Chassidus begins with being Makar of somebody else. That's the Allah base of our, the Deira Shvi, is the Chassidus is, that was Lashon Vestach, the Erste Maimer. If you want to feel close to Hashem, there's only one way. Al tikri ella. There's only one way. Bring somebody else close. Yeah, but it doesn't make sense. You know, first be a mensch yourself and make somebody else in the mensch. He says, not now. You want to be close to Atzma, say, bring somebody else close. Like the tzedakah kanach. Yeah, a person wants to have a gilui, but that doesn't get which is like Yossi Lovey. What's the teretz? Tzedakah. And in our generation, tzedakah doesn't mean $1 bill or $100 or $1,000. It means tzedakah ruchnis. When you're makad of somebody else, kol asher beish yitin bad nafshe, you come closer to the Eibush. So I wrote to him, if you want to look into the Rebbe's eyes, be makad of another person. And he was makabel it from me. I was very surprised. I was expected to get another was Hackstar Chinik, you know. But he said, he was happy. It's because it's the truth. I said to him, you'll be makar of other people, you'll see the Rebbe in your life. But it's not in some kind of, we're all brainwashed together kind of way. You'll see b'muchash. This pnimius dig with a Rebbe, a melech, a king, above everybody. But somehow he has a language that's so personal to each yochid v'yechida, every single one. This is why sometimes when they talk about malchus, they don't even mention the emotion. They speak only about the behavioral aspect. Because the emotional aspect does not exist really by people like you and me. It exists only by Yamelech. Anyway, this is the 7th Midah. Okay? So I think we've had 4 classes of these lectures that I've been giving. We did Chesed Gevurah Teferes. We did Netzach Heid and Yesed. I also explained to you the idea that Netzach Heid and Yesed are a higher source. And today we did Midas HaMalchus. So I just want to say, I'm saying this more for you than for me, that next week we're not going to go on to the Tanya. I want to say one more thing. There's another whole field which is discussed in Chassidus. This is not even in Igeres HaKedesh in Tanya, but you have it in the Maimorim, which is a fascinating field. I'm hoping the Eibishter will help me collect my thoughts, because it's not such an easy sugi to talk about, and it's called Chushim, the 5 senses. In addition to the 7 emotions, there's 5 senses: Re'iyah, Shmiyah, Tam, Re'ach, and Mishash. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. They're a whole different system. And Re'iyah, Shmiyah, Tam, Re'ach, and Mishash, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, are not only about food and wine and a nice car or a house or the smell and the texture of fresh leather on your new seats of your new car. In our relationship with the Eibishter, there's also Sh'u'marim enechem ru'u, Hashmayim esapim kevei keilu masa yadav Shma Yisrael yidav heren. The 5 senses are also in Yodam of our relationship with the Eibishter, and believe that we'll start it next week. I don't know how much time it's going to take, but I want to do this properly.